Hello and welcome back to the shop. Today we're going to continue with our screwdriver series, and I've been having a lot of fun with this. There's been some real great input from people, some good anecdotes from actually using these things, and I'm hoping through the end of this series we can do some good testing and get people a good understanding of which model might suit their applications the best. There's many options out there, some more expensive than others. Some have more torque than others, some, it just so much in between everything that hopefully we can help people out, figure out which products fits them best, and we'll get to play around in the shop here and do some testing. So, next product in our overview series before we get into testing is going to be this RYOBI. Now these are pretty cheap, they're around a lot of different places, mostly Home Depot and everything else, but they're older. They're micro USB charge. They don't have a collet style on them or anything like that, but they are around and they're fairly inexpensive, so I wanted to throw them in just because maybe this will fit somebody's needs once we get into the testing series phase, and maybe they can figure out this is actually something that'll work best for them. So let's get this open. If you're keeping track, this is made in Vietnam. Here's our cable. Here's our tips. Comes with a manual. But we're not going to look at that. Okay, so here's our tool. First impressions, it might go two different speeds, one in either direction. Here's our cable, our USB micro. Let's take a look at how this thing looks. And this isn't a bad cable, it's a cheaper cable. You can tell by the way the insulation is, but it has good strain relief on it, and I think it would hold up relatively well. Some of the stigma against micro USB is it's not always as fast to charge, and it's a little bit more finicky with the tabs inside of it. They can stop working before the USB-Cs, and it is kind of keyed. It has to go in one way, whereas USB-C will go in either orientation, so it's a little bit better in that regard. But USB micro works all the same. The tips that come with this, we have a 1/4 inch straight and a Phillips number 2 that have the ball detent in them, but unfortunately our tool only has magnetic holding, though it does seem like it has some sort of friction fit down inside there. And it might not actually have a magnetic holder in it. Let's take a look at that. Blowing it out. Yeah, this does not actually have a magnetic tip in it. So it's just relying on a friction fit, and it's really not that strong, unfortunately. But overall, let's take a look at the tool. It has some nice rubber molding on it here for grip. It has a feel that seems like it'd be relatively easy to tell what orientation the tool is in while you're using it. It is this color that makes it somewhat easy to find. Has a little bit of a delay when you turn it on. It probably goes to sleep and save on the batteries. Has a light on it. Nothing spectacular, but handy all the same. Let's get this thing charging. Now to charge it, we're going to get out our USB charger that we use here in the shop. We're going to plug this in, channel 1. And we'll check the orientation and plug in our cable. Okay, so we have a flashing green light, and we're taking 1.6 or 1.16 amps, close to 1.2, which is about normal for USB micro. We will see when it's done charging if the flashing green light goes steady or it goes out or whatever. While it's charging, you cannot use the tool. So after this is done charging, we'll get a good weight on it. For those of you that want to know how much weight you're carrying around, we'll take a reading on our speed with RPM on our Vita root tachometer, and we're going to do a stall test with our torque rig here and see how much torque it generates when it stalls. Okay, and we are back with the RYOBI. This thing is not taking any current on the charger. We've got a fully lit green light, so I think we're ready to go. So let's get our charger out of the way here and get that unplugged. It is micro USB. And we'll get into this thing. Now this thing isn't overly large compared to a bunch of the others. It's kind of smaller, which can be nice. The buttons are kind of flush, relatively not easy to hit, but not bad to use. They are a little further front than some of the others. It has decent rubber overmolding on it. This is plastic. Any of the greenish yellow is plastic. Everything else is rubber. The buttons are rubberized, though the black surround here is just plastic, but the buttons themselves are rubberized. First thing we're going to do here is take a look at the RPM. So we're going to get our 7/8 socket with a reflective strip on it, and we're going to shove that into our friction holder. As you can see, that socket has enough weight on it that if I flick it, it falls out. Alright, let's see what we get. So we're right around 213 RPM forward. Let's do backwards here. Very similar, about 218, so that's consistent at least. Let's change over and see how much torque this thing has, and to do that we're going to play around with our torque reader, which is inch pounds, and we're going to see if we can get some readings. Now these lower torque ones we've been a little bit more consistent. Some of the higher ones have been a little harder to be consistent on our readings, but let's see what we get here. Stalls right out. 15, 14, 16, 13. So we're in that 13 to 15 range forward. Let's do backwards. 11, 10, 9, 12. So we're kind of consistent in the 10 to 12, 13 to 15 forward, or 10 to 12 backwards, 13 to 15 forward. I think we're probably comparable with some of the others that are lower. This isn't quite where the Denali is at. This is lesser, but it's not bad. We've had weaker. The Cobalt and the Craftsman were weaker than this. For the size, this isn't bad. I just really wish they would have put a locking collet on this. This would actually be a decent, very compact, throw it in your gear and go with it tool, but the locking collet's kind of a deal breaker for me. Now, if you're going to use this for something else that doesn't really matter, this might not be all that bad. Now, what does this thing weigh? $235 grams. This thing is not all that heavy. In comparison, let's go with the Cobalt, which is right around that. And if we recall, the Cobalt does not have very high torque. Let's double check the Cobalt here. It's around the same. Yeah, it's around the same as the Cobalt here. That 9 to 11 forward and the backwards. So I'd say these two tools are contemporary, similar weight, similar everything. The Cobalt does have USB-C charging. Obviously it's a little bit smaller as well, which is the next thing that we'll look at here. The RYOBI, here's our 6-inch scale. The RYOBI is about 7 1/4 inches, and the Cobalt about 6 3/4. So a little bit different there. Yeah, a little bit different there. Now the diameter of the tool, the RYOBI is pretty cylindrical, so let's get our maximum dimension here. Very near 1.5 in the front, in the back kind of 1 3/8, and the back of the Cobalt is probably around 1 7/16. So kind of similar contemporary tools here. The Craftsman kind of falls into this range and everything. There's a bunch of them that are kind of in this area of torque and everything. So hopefully this was interesting. The goal of this series is to just kind of look at these tools and see what they're about. Once we get to our practical testing, it'll become a little bit more evident that I just kind of want to look at what these tools are capable of. So if somebody can easily get their hands on one of these, but maybe not something else, we've had some more obscure tools in these matchups that requires a little bit of effort to get your hands on, and they're good tools, but you know, if you don't need to have that kind of torque or something like that, and this would get you through with what you're working on, why not get it? It's a decent tool that might serve your purpose. So that's kind of the aim of the series here, where we'll establish a baseline of expectations of what these things can handle and how far you could use them, and then you can make the decision if it's good for you or not. The micro USB charge isn't really a big deal, but for some people it is. Sometimes things like that matter, and that's why we're bringing all this out and showing it. So if you have this thing, let me know in the comments below. Do you like it? Does it seem like it struggles with things that you would really like it to be able to do? Or does it do what you're asking of it flawlessly? For me, the biggest drawback is the chuck. I wish it was locking. Other than that, I don't think it's really a bad tool if you consider what market it's in. It's not in a high torque market. It's just in a nut runner, running screws type market. And I think it would do that relatively well if you're not looking to run massive fasteners. So as always, thanks for watching and have a great day.